And I think the first thing we need to do is to begin the webcast. So can I ask for that to begin, please?
I can confirm the webcast has now started.
Okay, thank you. And good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending this virtual meeting of the Hampshire Pension Fund Panel and Board Responsible Investment Subcommittee. I'm Paul Hodgson, Deputy Head of Legal Services, and I'm opening this meeting pending the chairman for the coming year being appointed. The meeting is being webcast on YouTube via the County Council's website. All decisions at today's meeting will be reached through a vote. I and in due course the chairman will call for the vote at the appropriate time under each item, with the vote and outcome read audibly by the Democratic Support Officer. I'll begin by reading the names of members on the committee so that they can confirm their attendance for the public record. And members, if you could please unmute and confirm your attendance when your name is called, so that we can check that you can be heard. So firstly, Councillor Cal Corkery.
Good morning, present.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Kemp-G.
Present.
Councillor Bruce Tennant.
Present.
And Councillor Tom Thacker.
Present. Good morning, Paul.
Thank you, members. We'll now move to the agenda, and item 1 is apologies for absence, and we have apologies from Councillor Andrew Joy and Mr. Neil Wood. And if any members have any other apologies to pass on, please do so. Okay, we move on to item 2, declarations of interest, and members will be familiar with the requirements in respect of disclosable pecuniary interest. So if members have any declarations in any item to be discussed today, please either declare that now or at the time the item is discussed. Okay. We'll move on to item 3, which is election of chairman. Members now asked to appoint a chairman of the subcommittee to sit until the next annual meeting in 2021. So I'll ask, please, for any nominations for chairman.
I'd like, if he's willing to stand, to nominate Councillor Kemp-G as chairman.
Thank you. Would anyone like to second that nomination?
Bruce, you're muted.
Sorry. I will second that very happily.
Thank you very much. Are there any other nominations? No. So could I just confirm then that members agree to appoint Councillor Kemp-G as chairman?
Agreed.
Okay, I've got nods and agreement. So Councillor Kemp-G, you are appointed as chairman, so I will hand over to you now. Thank you.
Well, thank you, members, for that, and thank you, Paul, for so efficiently introducing the meeting and supervising the election of the chairmanship. The item 4 on the agenda is the election of vice chairman. And if I may, members, I'd like to propose Councillor Tom Thacker as Vice Chairman of the subcommittee, and I would call for a seconder.
I'll second that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tennant. That's much appreciated. May we take a vote on that? Wave a hand. All those in favour? Thank you. Thank you all very much. That's unanimous. Much appreciated. Tom, you're the Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, everyone.
And now we move on to item 5, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of March. And let's have a quick look at those. If we may take the pages one by one. I'll use the agenda pages, page 5 page 6, page 7. Members, I'm going to propose that that is a true and accurate record of that meeting. Would you be agreeable to that? Okay.
Agreed.
Those minutes are accepted then. Thank you very much. Just back to the agenda. Item 6 on the agenda are deputations. There are no deputations notified under Standing Order 12. Chairman's announcements. Item 7, just to make a point, and that is that the constitution of the subcommittee is what it is, and as we touched on earlier, the quorum for the subcommittee meeting is 3, and we are 4 today, which is good. It's quite a tough quorum, well, not tough in percentage terms, but tough in numerical terms, because there are only 6 members of this subcommittee. So when we're without 2 today, Mr. Neil Wood and Councillor Joy, obviously we're only 4, which puts us one above being quorate. What that means is also that we need to remain quorate, as you probably all know, or we all know, for the whole meeting. So it is important that we retain our quorate, i.e. of at least 3 for the whole meeting. I mention that because it's come up at other meetings where people have had to leave, and it's endangered that meeting becoming inquorate. So thank you for that. I have no further chairman's announcements. And now we're going to move on to item 8 on the agenda, which is scheme member communication. And Andrew Bowflower is going to introduce that item for us.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good morning, members. This paper pulls on the item from the subcommittee's terms of reference to hear representations from scheme members on their views in relation to environmental, social and governance issues in relation to the pension fund's investments. And this paper summarises the correspondence that's been received in a variety of forms by the pension fund over the last 6 months. In that 6 months, the pension fund produced its first annual report on responsible investment and invited views from scheme members on how they felt the pension fund was tackling responsible investment. There were a small number of responses, ranging from those that felt the policy went too far to those that it felt wasn't far enough. But of that small number of responses, there was a small majority that was satisfied that the policy was more or less right. Also in the last 6 months, members will recall that a deputation was received to the main pension fund panel and board, supporting that the pension fund should disinvest from companies involved with fossil fuels and should be engaging with its scheme members to understand their views more on responsible investment and ESG items. That deputation was from a group, and there were 5 supplementary emails received that supported, or from the group supporting the view that was heard in the deputation. And there were also 5 electronic forms that the pension fund received, again supporting a similar view that the fund should be disinvesting from fossil fuels. And again, on a similar topic, there were 2 employers in the scheme that contacted the pension fund to support the view of disinvesting from companies involved in fossil fuels, but 1 employer that contacted the fund specifically to say that they didn't support that view. I would conclude by observing that the pension fund has received a number of correspondence to the fund, expressing strong views, particularly on issues relating to climate change and disinvesting from companies in fossil fuels. But in the context of the fund's 179,000 scheme members, they are a very small number of individuals, but are making those representations. And this again mirrors the take-up that the pension fund had when it consulted last summer on its new RI policy, where after extensive attempts to receive feedback in the form of emailing a sample of deferred members, communicating with the fund's employers to ask them to contact their scheme members, and also inserting an extract in the pensioners' pay slips, the fund only received 29 responses across a range of views. I will stop there. Thank you, members, and happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you, Andrew, very much. I think the key point is that we have gone to considerable lengths to communicate our new RI policy with scheme members. I don't think anyone can disagree with that point. We keep this under review, and clearly we need to continue at this level, at least in terms of seeking views. As Andrew's pointed out, you know, we have got getting on for 170,000 members, and now clearly we need, if possible, a good number of those to express their opinion either way, and we're not getting that at the moment, to be frank. I'd also venture to suggest that the policy that we're adopting is probably quite an ambitious policy in this area. So we're not dragging our feet at all, because we believe that we're reflecting certainly the views of the Pension Fund panel and board in pushing on with our agenda. And that is laid out before you. And my final point is that, as you know, I have the privilege of being chairman of the access pool of LGPS funds, and that is 11 LGPS funds across the whole of the central, eastern, and southern England, amounting to about 1.65 million members altogether. And I've argued before that I believe that Hampshire is right in the forefront of policy in terms of all those funds, and many of them are catching up with us fast, I'm pleased to say. And so this is not just a policy that we need to implement in Hampshire, but right across the access pool. And I think Hampshire has proven very valuable in leading the way there as well. So I just wanted to tell you the work that we're doing is perhaps much more thorough, much more evidence-based, much more effective than many people may think. And I think it's worth making that point. So now let me throw this open to members of the subcommittee for question or comment. And are there any questions or comments on this paper?
Chairman, I think Councillor Corkery has a question.
Councillor Corkery.
Thank you, Chair. I have a number of questions, 3 in total. Would you prefer me to ask them all in one go or separately?
Ask them all in one go.
Okay, that's fine. So the first one relates to section 5, where it talks about the RI annual report being printed and sent to 43,000 pensioners that are part of the scheme. Just a query really about what communication avenues are available to current members. I know it's referred to that the annual report is published on the website, but yeah, just querying that and seeing if there's any opportunities for kind of further engagement with current members. Second one was around section 6, and you may or may not be able to answer this, but my question would be, who were the employers that put forward those particular views? And lastly, a more general point around communicating with scheme members. I know there were several different avenues that were referred to, but I wondered if there had also been any engagement with the recognised trade unions to explore any role they may be able to play in communicating with their members in relation to the work of the Pension Board.
Thank you for those questions. Andrew, are you happy to take those?
Sure, Councillor Kempji. So in regard to the first issue around communication with effectively non-pensioner members, we haven't done anything specific in the last year other than publish the report on the website, as Councillor Corkery observed. But as I mentioned, in the last summer, when we did launch the new policy and ask for views, we did specifically target all three of the pensioner groups. So principally with active scheme members, we would contact them through their employers. So we wrote out to all those employers, asked them to highlight this to their scheme members. We know Hampshire County Council used the Director of Corporate Resources blog to highlight this to Hampshire County Council employees. And for the deferred members, where communication is sometimes a little bit more difficult, we emailed a sample of 500 deferred members, again, to highlight this and ask for their views when the new policy was launched in draft. I'll stop. I think Andy was possibly trying to add something.
Andrew Lowe.
Chairman. Yeah, I was also just going to add, Andrew, that we've got the annual employers meeting coming up in just under a month, and that is another perfect opportunity where we'll be able to remind all employers about the annual report and about all the work that we're undertaking in the area of RI. So that'll be a perfect opportunity where hopefully we'll be reaching. Normally, when it's physical attendance, is normally 100 plus. I would hope with the virtual attendance, it could be much more in terms of employers. So that's another perfect opportunity for us to spread that message.
I think just as I'd just add, when Andrew Beauflower mentions the Treasurer's blog, Director of Corporate Resources, blog to scheme members in Hampshire County Council. Councillor Corker, you may know that approximately just about half of current working scheme members are employees of the County Council. So in essence, one might argue that that blog could have reached or was available to half the scheme members. Is that okay in terms of your first question? Or should we answer all the questions? Then if you want to come back on any of them, please do. Should we do it that way? Okay, so Andrew, the second question was about the two employers. I can't comment on that. Whether Paul would also like to comment on that, Paul Hodgson, I don't know. Over to you.
If I can, we'll start, Councillor Kempji. I don't have any specific names to hand. I can follow up with the members probably offline would be the best thing if that's helpful. But I believe a couple of them were parish councils. If that helps now.
And a parish council would count as an employer even if it only had one member.
Absolutely.
And indeed many parish councils, as we know, do only have one member, which is their parish clerk. God bless them everywhere. I think now, obviously reserving Councillor Corker's right to come back on that, let's deal with the third question, which was trade unions engagement, trades union engagement. Andrew, do you want to handle that one as well?
Sure. So the pension fund hasn't been any specific communication with trade unions, but obviously, again, as has been observed, the material is online, published for all scheme members, and obviously the trade unions can highlight that to their membership if they wish. Carolyn.
Kempji, if I could just add, I think it's a really helpful point to have been made, and what we can do is communicate that as part of the request to employers to make sure that they are employees that are in the pension scheme are made aware. So we could ask them to also make that connection with their relevant trades unions within the organisations. It wouldn't be our role as a pension fund administration team to contact individual trade unions at employer basis, but it absolutely would be appropriate for us to remind employers to include their trade unions when they're rolling the messages out. So I think we'll add that to the list of requests for employers, if that's okay.
Yep, it seems sensible to me. So let's do that anyway. Right, thank you very much, Director. And Councillor Corkery, back to you in terms of those responses for your comments.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think they pretty much covered the questions that I put forward. Just a quick follow-up on the last point. And I appreciate I'm kind of relatively new to the board and to this committee, so this may have been something that's previously been discussed, but my understanding is that other pension boards have trade union representation on the board, a place reserved for trade unions. Is that the case? And if so, is that something that has been considered in Hampshire?
Well, it has been the subject of correspondence between myself and one particular trades union. I'm sure they won't mind me mentioning their name. It's Unison. And we made it perfectly clear, of course, that we are surprisingly representative, I believe, in that, as you know, we have 3 scheme member representatives, full members of the committee with full voting rights from the scheme membership. One representing, or one drawn from, the retired members of the scheme, one drawn from the deferred members, and one drawn from the working members. And of course, all 3 of those slots are open to trades union membership. Now, it is true that at the moment, none of those 3, as far as I'm aware, is a member of a trades union, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't an opportunity for it. If your question is, do we reserve a slot specifically for trade unions, then we do not, but they are open to trade union, and I'm sure you'll appreciate the distinction there. So that's where we stand at the moment. Is there anything you'd like to add to that? Councillor Corkery?
Sorry, Joe, I wasn't sure who you were referring to. No, I think that's answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, there we go. I think that was a useful debate. We need clearly.
Chair.
Yes, sorry.
Apologies, I think Councillor Tennant wishes to talk.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I now see your hand. Councillor Tennant, apologies.
That's okay. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question really is about transparency. I've been on the panel for quite a number of years now, and I fully understand it. It's quite a difficult brief. It's very particular to this segment of the industry. The questions I get from the public reflect, I suppose, where I was when I joined the panel. And so I'm finding we've moved in a very good direction. I'm very happy with the fact that we've got this subcommittee is a testament to that. And it's useful that we've got a page on our website for RI, but it's written in a very technocratic way. And so in Andrew's introduction to this agenda item, I've received similar questions, and so they normally always revolve around fossil fuels, where the whole industry, the world has moved on from just environmental considerations, but there's also social and governance considerations, which we're dealing with, and it's very extensive, and this is why we've hired Hudson Spring to give us advice, because it is so difficult for us to get our heads around. So the transparency thing is that I think it's very good that we've got that page for responsible investment, but I don't think it's very easy to understand for the public to understand. I like the bits of where, you know, because people say to us, well, they want us to divest our the equity holdings that we have in various fossil fuel companies. And we've said in the past, and we've had, you know, many of us attend conferences and what have you to get to grips with all of this. And we've decided that we're, quite rightly, I believe, going to use our weight in the stock that we hold to change the direction that some of these companies might be taking. But the public think, we just should pull out of these holdings. It would be good if we had some less technocratic explanation of that, just something that's short and sharp. At the bottom of the responsible investment page, there's links to Baillie Gifford and other such companies with how they voted with respect to responsible investment, but it's not that easy to understand, I think, for the public. So what I'm asking really is that I think we should have a less technocratic explanation of what we're doing in not too many words. The other point that's been made to me is this very committee, and in fact the pension panel committees as well, I suppose, really, that some of the items that people might be interested in are exempt business. And I know we've had this discussion before about why exempt business, but maybe if we could explain more in the bits that are not exempt, that it would satisfy some of the questions that members of the public have. And I think this is why, you know, even for us members of the panel, we have to do quite a lot of work to make sure that we understand what we're doing. So I can completely understand where, you know, members of the public are coming from when they contact us about green issues, and it's quite difficult without something that explains it in a more straightforward way. It's quite difficult to appease those people that contact us.
Well, thank you very much for that. I mean, two strong points made there. Firstly, on the complexity over technical language of the RI page on the website. Let's deal with that first. Director, would you like to handle that one?
Yes, Chairman. I think some really valid points coming forward from Councillor Tennant, and obviously, what we do want to do is to get messages out there that can be clearly understood. We do want to be transparent, and you're right. We did previously have a conversation about why is information in the confidential section, not the public section. To be honest, if as a panel and board we want to do more around communication, because what you're suggesting would actually mean we would need to have people who would go through various documents that I accept they're technical documents because that's what we're required to produce, and try and turn them into more easily digestible documents. I think as a panel and board we would need to be prepared as part of the budget setting for the panel and board's budget to look to create additional communication posts, because to be honest, that's what we do not have to support the administration of the fund. We've never found it necessary to do that before, but if the panel and board wants to embark upon that, then that would be something that they could look at in terms of agreeing additional budget, which would obviously increase the costs to the constituent member employers. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. Actually, Director, as you may know, it's a decision that the Access Pool has taken to enhance its public relations and communications side, with ESG focusing quite largely in that decision. So I hear what you say with great interest, and if members consider this to be a good idea, and I'll ask their opinion in a moment, we might well think of bringing that forward to the panel and board in terms of our budget setting for the end of this year, beginning of next year. With that in mind, I think it's a very good idea, actually. We'll come back to that in a moment, because the second point was something that we have looked at. It was a point that Councillor Corkery, as I recall, brought up as well at the last panel and board meeting. I'm not sure who's best placed. Is it Paul Hodgson who's best placed, do you think, Director, to answer that particular point?
Yes, Chairman, I'm just wondering, Councillor Corkery has his hand up, so I just wonder if it might be helpful if he added his comments, and then maybe Paul can respond if that's helpful.
Yep, okay. Councillor Corkery.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and it was on this point, which is why I thought I'd try and come in now. I was going to make the comment later on in the meeting with regards to the information that has been made publicly available from this meeting, and the information that's been withheld. I agree almost entirely with Councillor Tennant's contribution on this issue. I've received quite a lot of communication from team members, as well as local taxpayers, with regards to the information that isn't published in relation to these meetings. I mean, just to use one example of item agenda number 12, so it's entitled Environmental, Social and Governance Assessment. There's one paragraph which has been put into the public domain, which just says it's to consider a report from the consultants relating to ESG issues, basically. That is the only indication of what the content is, which is very limited. It's just a general title and kind of brief description. Looking at the report, I am not convinced that the entirety of that report is should be subject to being withheld from publication. I think there's actually quite a lot of information within that it would be very helpful for to be in the public domain in order to help educate local taxpayers and members of the scheme about how their money is being invested, and how the panel and the board is overseeing the management of those particular aspects. So yes, this was a point that we made, that I made at the last panel meeting, but I do think it's kind of becoming more and more of a pressing issue. The concern for ESG issues is only going to become more prevalent amongst the wider community. And I think that it's important that we're doing all we can to ensure that as much information as is possible is made available. Thank you.
Yes, I hear you loud and clear, but I was also pleased, if I may, and I hope I'm not putting words into your mouth, I'm pleased to hear your acceptance that clearly there are issues and topics in item 12 that, to my way of thinking, are definitely confidential. I mean, clearly no one would like if you like, a sort of a pecking order, in our opinion, of where our fund managers stand at the moment in terms of engagement on this issue. And our policy is very distinctly is to be evidence-based. So we want more evidence. We don't want to go off, you know, at 90 miles an hour when we need to carefully proceed in this area. And also, I think it's fair to say that our policy, in common with many others, in fact, almost all others, is to, in the first instance, do it by investigation, evidence, persuasion, and logic, rather than in draconian measures. It's only as a final resort that we would use some of our powers. And I think while that process is going on, it is better it's conducted in a confidential manner. And for what it's worth, my experience in the investment world suggests that you actually get better results. Like we achieve better results for our portfolio by having an ESG policy in the companies that do not have satisfactory ESG policies are increasingly likely to have underperforming shares. So we see a logic in what we're doing. So I think that's where I come from. But Paul, would you like to, Councillor Coulter has made a very specific and interesting point that although I think he accepts the principle clearly of having confidential reports, he's suggesting that perhaps we should use a finer sieve on these reports to perhaps include more in the public domain. And I'd like your opinion on that, please, Paul.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it is an interesting one, and there is always a balancing exercise done when assessing does a report meet one of the exempt categories in the 1972 Act. So the monitoring officer or somebody on behalf of the monitoring officer has to balance whether the public interest in being transparent and open is outweighed by the public interest in maintaining confidentiality. And obviously, where we're dealing with things that may have commercially sensitive issues or intellectual property issues, then there is a legitimate need to keep those matters confidential and exempt. I think what can be done, and this is one probably for officers to think about when writing reports, we do this quite frequently as well. We will look first to try and exempt an appendix or a part of a report before the whole thing becomes exempt. And sometimes that is feasible, sometimes it isn't. It depends on the nature and the content of the exempt part of the information and what that leaves in the remainder of the report. But it is something that I think probably Andrew and co do bear in mind and do think about, and are prompted to think about by or on behalf of the monitoring officer as well. So I think that's something we can perhaps revisit and rethink about when we're writing reports in the future.
That's helpful. Councillor Sacco, have you, could I ask you for an opinion on this matter?
Well, it occurs to me, Chairman, that you know, we have a programme in the general in the full pension fund panel and board of training, and I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to invite the monitoring officer to give us a training session in exemption and how it's qualified and worked. I'm sure Paul could do it, but if we invite the monitoring officer herself, it might add a certain extra, no more than that.
A certain piquancy, yes.
Thank you. That's the word, sir.
I think from that, officers will deduce that that we feel, I think all of us feel, that we want to try and put the maximum, the realistic maximum in the public domain. I think that is a fair point. It may mean more work, I'm afraid, because it may mean that we'll have to strip down some of the papers where perhaps it's been, in terms of the whole, it's made more sense to have all that paper in the exempt section, where possibly some of the paper could be outside and some of it inside, and that will require a sieving process by professionals, reflecting hopefully the opinions of not only this subcommittee, but I think we can take it probably reflecting the committee, the opinion of the panel and board as well. So, Director, can I leave that with you? And perhaps you'll come back to us on it in the not too distant future.
Yes, Chairman. Rest assured, we do always aim to be as transparent as possible. Wherever we've left reports in confidential, it's because in our view, it is in the best interests of the pension fund. As you commented yourself, Chairman, we're dealing with billions of pounds worth of investment, and if we allow information to slip into the public domain, the unintended consequences on those investments could be quite significant. But more than happy, perhaps what we can do as a team is have a look at backwards at some of our reports and challenge ourselves again with Paul's assistance on whether there was anything we could have done differently. So more than happy to do that, because if there is more we can do, then clearly we would want to. Again, if that's going to have resource implications, then we'll come back to the panel and board and indicate that for budget setting. But hopefully that will reassure you that we are listening, and we will do an exercise that looks carefully at what else, if anything, can we do differently. Thank you.
Well, that's very, very helpful indeed. Thank you for that. And I think it would be good to have a reference to both these 2 points. One, perhaps a change in our enhancement of our communication policy in this area, and also a sieving process for exempt reports referred to in the minutes. I think we'd all agree that would be very helpful as well. So I think, if I may say so, it's been a very helpful.
Chairman, Councillor
yes.
has his hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry, Councillor Tennant. I'm training myself to look for these little hands, and I missed it. I do apologise.
That's quite okay. No, it's just as the conversation's been going along, it's made me realise that if I was a member of the public and I was interested in following this meeting, I was interested in environmental issues, and I'd done some reading and I realised, oh, there's social and governance to look at as well. I look at the agenda and I see, oh, look at that, item 12, environmental, social and governance assessment. I'd like to listen to see what that's about, but then find it's exempt business. And I'm not saying this should not be exempt business. I agree it should be, but I think in the interests of transparency, maybe we should, in reflection, we should have expanded this this meeting so to have 2 parts to it. So a part that's exempt to the part that we've got here, but another part where we discuss ESG issues that are not exempt, to help educate the public, because many of the questions I'm getting from the public are behind the curve. I think they're where I think the panel was 10 years ago, and the whole of the industry has moved on now.
Yeah,
and there are budgeting issues.
Well, I think I mean, I hear what you say, but I do think I'm not saying we've completely covered that point, but we have covered it to the degree that we are resolved to have a much better look at how we communicate what we do and how we do it with scheme members, and that's something we're going to look at the budget, you know, connotations, and hopefully produce some sort of policy on this. I think it would be difficult to envisage the subcommittee having a sort of, you know, embarking on some sort of lecture tour as well, because we're not professionals. Certainly, I think any member of the public listening to this debate would have found it extremely interesting, I have to say. But I'm not, at this stage, I think we've covered, you know, the intent behind what you've just said, and we'll continue to look at it, Councillor Tennant.
Thank you, Chair.
I can't see any other hands up, so in acknowledging what a useful debate that has been, with quite a number of actions coming out of it, may I draw members' attention to the recommendation on page 9 of the committee report, which is that the communication to and from scheme members on RI issues be noted. And that doesn't require a vote, it just requires assent. So I certainly assent to that. And again, just to repeat, that the minutes will reflect some of the items that we wish to be further explored and taken forward. So would that report be noted, members?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. And we now move on to item 9, which is shareholder voting highlights, and Andrew Burflower is going to introduce that report for us.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to let Gemma introduce this one, if that was okay.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Gemma. Welcome, Gemma. Yes, you're going to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. This report provides information on how the pension fund's investment managers have voted on behalf of the fund for the equities that they are invested in during the period January to June 2020. How votes are cast by the pension fund will be determined by the voting policy, which for Hampshire varies depending on how the equity investment is held. Directly held equities will be voted in accordance with Hampshire's voting policy, which is part of its responsible investment policy. Equities directly held in the Access pool will be voted in accordance with Access's voting guidelines, which were agreed by the Joint Committee. Equities in pooled funds of external investment managers will be voted in accordance with the investment manager's voting policy, which applies to all holdings within that fund. As a result of the pension fund's policy, there is a risk that its investment managers could cast their votes differently for the same shareholder resolution, and an example of this is described in paragraph 14 onwards. However, the fund believes its current policy remains the best approach as it enables the fund's investment managers to cast votes in line with a portfolio investment strategy that led to holding that stock. Currently, Dodge & Cox are not able to provide any further information to support their voting decisions. This is because of being managers of a pooled fund, and if they provided the pension fund with further information, that information would also need to be made available to all investors and the regulator. However, Dodge & Cox have agreed with the investors in the Access pool to move to a segregated portfolio and are currently implementing the necessary changes with the pool operator Link. This will enable Dodge & Cox to improve the frequency of reporting and level of information provided on shareholder voting in line with the other investment managers in the Access pool. In order for the RI subcommittee to scrutinise the voting activity for the pension fund's investments, a summary of voting highlights for the period January to June 2020 is contained in Appendix 1. The highlight report does not attempt to quantify the number of votes cast by the fund's investment managers, but focuses on providing examples of the types of issues where investment managers have voted against company management, resolutions of fellow shareholders, or on sensitive or topical issues. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, Gemma, thank you. Actually, it's a very, very interesting report. And while you were giving it, it distinctly reminded me that although we tend to focus on environmental, ecological issues, it's equally important that we focus on social and governance issues, because however keen we are to deal with climate change and issues such as that and health, it is equally important that we deal with such issues as child labour, slavery type issues generally. And, it's a very useful reminder that good governance is equally important as the E and the S as well. So it's a very useful reminder that you've given me. So thank you for that. Certainly, the para 14 is absolutely riveting, and it's something that we should also bear in mind. And I also absolutely welcome what you said about Dodge & Cox and being able, by segregating their portfolio, it now will give us a much better opportunity to engage with them on this type of issue. So for all those reasons, thank you very much indeed for that report. Members, I throw it open to you. It's only for noting, but I do hope you found it as interesting as I did, and gives us plenty to go forward with. Are there any questions or comments on this report? Councillor Corkery.
Thank you, Chair. Section 10 talks about voting highlights and explains that the appendix, I believe, gives examples of the type of issues where investment managers have voted in particular ways. I just wondered who has decided those examples. Were those examples provided by the fund managers, or did council officers look at the full list and pick out the ones that they felt most relevant?
Gemma?
So I went through the full list of all the managers voting and pulled out the most topical issues and where they voted against company management and for the resolutions of shareholders, etc. So yes, I did go through everything.
I think that's very useful. Thank you, Gemma.
Can I just follow up very quickly on that one? By the sounds of it, we have the information of all the votes that have been taken, and I note that it says in the report that's going to be a lot of information, but is that something that, is there any reason why that can't be made publicly available?
Chairman, I can step in here. If the subcommittee and the pension fund panel and board would prefer, we're more than happy. We'll simply attach the whole document as the appendix. There was no intention to do anything other than try and be helpful, so we can easily do that. Gemma or Andrew will confirm.
So all the information is available on the Responsible Investment website for the Hampshire Pension Fund, and there's a link to that within the report. So everything is available. I think what's happened previously is we've provided more information directly to the RI subcommittee before, and it was found more helpful to provide this sort of summary in the first instance.
Thank you.
Chairman,
I think the summary is helpful. Yeah, the summary is helpful. If the full information is available on the website, then that is fine for me. That's another else. Thank you.
Yep, well done.
Thank you.
Excellent response from officers. Thank you very much. Any other points at this stage on this item? It's obviously work in progress. It will go on seamlessly with all the information available. Members, thank you very much for that. I'm now going to turn to the recommendation at paragraph 2 on page 15 of your agenda pack. Pension Fund Responsible Investment Subcommittee notes how the pension fund's investment managers have voted the shares in the fund's portfolios, and some of them are highlighted in this report. Would that be noted, members, please?
Noted, Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Noted.
Thank you, Val. Thank you all. Moving on now. We come to item 10, which is the exclusion of the press and public under the relevant sections of the Local Government Act 1972. And I'm going to propose that the members of the press and the public are now excluded under the terms of that Local Government Act. And members, all those in favour, please show. If necessary, we will have a vote on this. Perhaps I think actually we will have a vote on this. Caroline, can I hand over to you to conduct a poll on this issue?
Of course, Chairman. So members, I'll verbally ask for those who wish to abstain, those who are against the recommendation, and those who are for. So firstly, can I ask if any members wish to abstain from voting? Lovely. And are any members against the recommendation? Thank you. I then take it that all members are for. It'd be helpful if you could verbally agree to that, please.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Lovely. That recommendation is carried, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Members, we're just going to wait for Democratic Services to reconfigure the the meeting. And Caroline, will you indicate when we can proceed?